I want to go into, if it's okay, to the scientific community before we go into black holes and galaxies and
anything.
stuff. We discussed before about Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Cox, which last time you gave them a criticism, which you basically said that they are not valid, credible source of science.
Well, they're not practitioners. So I call them the Kardashians of science. The way to define them is as influencers. So what is the role of an influencer? Is someone that wants to be liked by a lot of people and then influence their views about, in this case, science. So they are speaking the language of how would I appeal to a large community, large audience, while at the same time going with the flow of the scientific community. The problem is that sometimes the scientific community is going in the wrong direction. Just consider Brian Greene, that was advocating for decades string theory, which is now in bad shape. Everyone recognizes that because of the reasons that were pointed out early on, but he completely ignored them and celebrated, of course, the success of electromagnetism as if it's the foundation for string theory, but it's completely different. Because string theory talks about extra dimensions, talks about speculative ideas that we don't know exist, right? And then the question is, how do we make progress? It's by experimentation, testing them. But the problem is, if you just do mathematical gymnastics, you don't make necessarily predictions, because it turns out there are many versions of string theory. We don't know which one is the correct one. And moreover, you can't say much about what happened before the Big Bang, what happens inside a black hole. So it's like having a plumber come to your home and you say, can you fix the toilet? And he says, sorry, it's too complicated. Can you fix my faucet? No, it's too complicated. But he tells you, but if you go to the metaverse, there I'm a super plumber, and it's in extra dimensions. I can actually solve the problems in all plumbing problems in 11 dimensions. I can do that for you. And what would you do? You would say, okay, well, thank you so much. And that's the situation we're at right now with string theory that was promised to be the theory of everything. Turns out that it's the theory of nothing, because we can't really use it to make predictions about how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity. Now, my point is, this was sold by Brian Greene as the foundation of the frontiers of physics for decades. And so you have these science influencers. Now, Brian was actually doing some research during...
Which one of them?
Brian Greene was doing some research during these years. But others, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, he didn't publish a single scientific paper within the past 2 decades.
Of course,
And my point is, if you are sitting on the bench and describing what happens in the soccer field, let's say right now it's the World Cup, so it's very timely. Lots of people are sitting on the, looking at the game. You can describe it and become popular, right? That's no problem. But the one thing you cannot do is score a goal, because you are sitting on the bench. So an influencer is different. I mean, if you want to tell the difference between a Kardashian of science and a practitioner of science, it's the fact that a practitioner of science can make a discovery.
Yeah, and he's on the field.
And moreover, another distinguishing signature, before that practitioner make the discovery, before he scores a goal or she scores a goal, before that, how would you be able to tell that they are practitioners? By the fact that they're not trying to be popular. Because sometimes they pay attention to evidence that nobody else pays attention. In the early days of any breakthrough, you have people who work on something that nobody else appreciates. And once they make the discovery, of course, everyone says it's obvious. But before that, they are not popular. So if you see someone who is always popular, that means they're always flowing with the wind. They can write a book that is called Take Me to Your Leader. When UAP, this UFO subject, becomes popular, they will write about it. Why? Because it's popular. While 5 years earlier, they would decline, they would ridicule it, decline to talk about it. That's the signature of an influencer, because an influencer always wants to be liked, always wants to be popular. So when the narrative changes, they change their tune. But they cannot be the agent that brings the change.
I don't know if there is a place in popular, popular
culture,
for this matters, for people who will give the public the science in a more...
I mean, there are servers in restaurants, right? What do? They don't cook the food. They just bring the food to the
commentators in soccer.
It's completely legitimate, but they should not be the authority. That's my point.
My question that I want to go in which is quite a bit different direction, which is, if you add to Stillman their case for against your approach, what would it be? And
it would be very simple. They would say, first, it's not popular within the mainstream. Second, for a good reason, they would say, because there is no clear evidence. My answer to that is that if the mainstream is not willing to engage in studying this subject, there will not be evidence, right? So it requires a lot of effort from people like myself to get private funding, either from foundations or from individuals, so that I can support a program called the Galileo Project, where we collect new data. We have 3 observatories. The latest one is in Las Vegas. And that came about, just to give an example, I gave a TED Talk 2 years ago, and the owner of the Madison Square Garden and the owner of Sphere in Las Vegas, his name is Jim Dolan. He saw my talk and called me and said he watched it twice and said,
it was amazing.
Could I meet with you? And I said, sure. And then within a week, he showed up with his bodyguards at my home, and we had the conversation, and he asked me whether I'm willing to put an observatory of the Galileo Project on top of Sphere. And I said, sure. And with him was Jane Rosenthal, who is she is the director of Tribeca, the executive director. So, so these are the kinds of supporters that I get. There were a number of billionaires visiting me and supporting. But my point is, the mainstream of science is still reluctant to address the collection of data. Now, it may well be, and that's my other role right now, that we get high-quality data from government, because they invested in a lot of sensors and they might find the evidence that we are seeking. But in parallel to them, I have the Galileo Project, observing the sky, looking for objects that move outside the performance envelope of human-made technologies, okay?
Yeah.
And so my point is, I wish that this was a mainstream subject within physics, because then if you search for a decade for those things and collect data and you don't find anything, then you can say, there is no evidence. But without doing this work, how can you say that? Now, at the same time, the mainstream of science was looking for weakly interacting massive particles as dark matter. We haven't found anything. So if we were to invest billions of dollars, like we did in the case of dark matter, towards the study of UAPs, okay? If we just did the same and didn't find anything, we would be at the same place as the mainstream community is right now with respect to the nature of dark matter. They did the investment, put a lot of time, research time, didn't find anything. In the case of UAPs, they didn't put the time or the money, and they claim there is no evidence. Obviously, it's because nobody did that seriously. So that's the way I see it. And, like anything in science, early on, the evidence is unclear. It's just anomalies that flag new knowledge.
Yeah.
And you have to pay attention to anomalies. You can't ridicule them. And that's true also of interstellar objects, another subject that I work on. And I'm basically anomaly seeking. I'm just looking for things that do not line up with what we already know as a signature of more studies, so that we can get good enough data. Because if we have a high-resolution image of a spacecraft and it's not human-made, then we will know for sure. And in order to get that, we need to be curious. We need to be intrigued by the anomalies that at first are not conclusive, but once you get into it and you study these objects, you will find that they are conclusive.
Yeah, I'm sorry for being the devil's advocate in this matter,
go
but just for discussion purposes.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, I should say, in the committee, I forgot to mention, I also selected a skeptic, and I was attacked for that. And I said, I disagree with this skeptic. In fact, I have a bet with him that he's wrong, that by 2030, there will be clear evidence that we are visited by extraterrestrial technological
By 2030?
artifact. Yeah.
Wow.
And I had a bet with him, but I also wanted him to be in the committee. And you might ask why. First of all, to avoid any biases in the way we deliberate. If we are forgetting some important argument, he will bring it up. Secondly, if we get convinced that there is indeed something unusual, and he is convinced of that, and he started in a completely different opinion, then I know that we did something right, because he agrees with that. And of course, he also represents a community of people, so they need a representation in the committee. So I included him. I thought that's a good choice. But immediately I was attacked by people who already know the answer. And by the way, I'm completely resilient to these attacks because I get attacked from both sides of the spectrum. I get attacked by mainstream scientists who don't want to hear about these things. And I get attacked by believers who know already the answer. And, that's the only way for me to do the right thing.
Yeah. So